everybody, and welcome to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. We're really excited for this guest because it's a little bit of we've now actually had a couple professions come onto the show, right, Lucas, that are a little bit outside our norm, that actually really bring a whole new dimension to the conversation. So we were lucky enough to get to speak to Joel, who was the voice of the Kansas City Royals a couple weeks ago, if people remember that. And he recommended Mark LeBlanc, who I believe he works with you, Mark, as a coach, or you being his coach. But I believe you've also had quite an expansive amount of experience. So before I just ruin it, you're going to do a much better service to your experience. Would you mind introducing yourself to our audience so that we can hear about your wonderful past experience and what you're doing now?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And Joel might have been a little bit too kind.
Doubt it.
I've been on my own virtually my entire adult life. I had a job once for about 6 months, and at the age of 21, I was inspired by the 2 words, "You're fired." And I made a vow at 21 that I would do whatever it would take to make it on my own. And this coming year, I will celebrate my 40th anniversary of being being my own boss and being in business for myself. And I am a business coach to Joel Goldberg. I've also a business development speaker and presenter, and I've written 6 books, including my first book, Growing Your Business. And my crowning achievement is a book I published titled Never Be the Same, based on a short 500-mile walk across Spain called the Camino de Santiago. But possibly what I might be of good help to your viewers and listeners here today is that I'm a past leader of the National Speakers Association, and certainly brought a lot of business ideas and creative ways to maybe look a little differently at association work.
I love that. We've talked a lot in past episodes of how can we bring more of an entrepreneurial spirit to the association world, who, I'm going to wave a broad brush, but doesn't have much, right? It sort of tends to be behind the curve in technology, behind the curve in thinking and innovative. And I've even talked to some associations and say, we could help you grow your organization. And they say, I don't want to grow.
Yeah.
It's kind of shocking to me. But I'd love to hear, some of those entrepreneurial type ideas. How did you implement those? What were some of the challenges, and what are some of those victories that came out of it at NSA?
Well, there's no end to the challenges today, especially as we come through the pandemic and are still challenged by in-person events versus hybrid events versus virtual events. But I will go on record as saying there's never been a better time to be in this profession. And I think there's never been a greater need. And whether it was 9/11 or the economic downturn in 2008, or now the pandemic, I think it forces us to step back and be more creative and innovative than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, I don't know if you want to call it a pearl of wisdom or something that I'm known for, is no change, no change.
Yeah.
And
well said.
When I was in a volunteer leadership position and on the board for NSA, the National Speakers Association, for almost 9 years, hopefully I brought some good business ideas, but one is the more focused you are, the easier everything becomes. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the challenges that associations and groups of small, medium, and large face is that they usually start out with a sense of direction and focus around a particular passion.
Mhm.
And I'm going to use NSA as an example. NSA started, I'm going to say 40 some years ago. I don't remember the exact number, but it started as a way for people who were interested in the business of speaking to come together to support each other. And I think what happened to NSA, as well as many associations, is that over time, we try to become too many things to too many people.
Yeah.
And when I gave my induction speech as the incoming president, one of the things that both drew praise and my harshest critics was I took a stand and it said, we're the National Speakers Association. We're not the National Consultants Association. We're not the National Coaches Association, you know, and then the line I will forever be known for is, and if you want to stay home and make money in your jammies, go join the Make Money in Your Jammies Association. and so
There is an association for that, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Well, there is, and it wasn't that I do coaching, I do write books, I do a variety of things, but I never went to NSA to learn how to do those things better.
Right.
And one of the messages I shared was people come to NSA for two reasons, and only two reasons. One, to speak better, and two, to speak more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think any association, small, medium, or large, if they reconnect to what really brings people to them and they stay true. Seth Godin in his book, The Dip, talks about how businesses, start with a passion, they grow, and then something happens. Maybe it's out of their control, like one of the three times I mentioned, but then they hit a valley, and out of fear, not out of smarts,
right,
they get in this valley and they believe the answer is diversification. And seldom do they ever get back to what made them strong in the first place.
Yeah.
Scope creep.
True. A couple of things really resonate with me. One is the power of focus, right? Don't go chasing the shiny things. Don't go too wide because you end up too flat. There's only so many resources to go around. And this idea that we also have a mantra on our coach that comes in and does our strategic planning, and we start every annual strategic planning with all growth ends. Right? So this mantra that you're going to get to this point, but you have to be prepared to do something different. As you said, if you don't change, you don't change. And we've seen this a lot in sort of the bell curve of membership. And we talked a little bit before the show about the aging of members. And you start to see this sort of aging plateau of the membership where you want to see more diversity and you want to see it scale and grow in that regard. And now that's a hard ship to turn around. I'm curious if you've worked with some of that, and what does that look like? How do you address that?
Well, as in business, as in the association world, one of my best practices is leverage your database. And in the association world, the translation would be looking at creative ways to leverage your membership. And the best way to do that, in my estimation, is through segmentation and even hyper segmentation, where you start to break down or divide or create opportunities for like-minded people to meet in subgroups. And so NSA built about 30 subgroups of people, so that no matter what your focus or interest was, there was always a home for you. It wasn't just coming into a new community, but it was coming into a new community. And if you were one of the young guns, we had a place for you. If you were a seasoned veteran, if you were a humorist, if you had a special interest in training, that all of a sudden those little subgroups or sub-communities within the larger group.
Yeah.
Today, and this is the hard news. Well, I'm 61. I've been a member of NSA now since I was 21. But
wow.
When I was 21 years old, young, hopefully bright, a little wet behind the ears, that at that time, I and a number of people that I've grown up with in the profession, we were thrilled to become a part of a community, keep our mouths shut, listen and learn from some of the best in our industry. I mean, I have listened to, learned from, lunched with the Zig Ziglars and the Ogmandinos and Ira Hayeses and of the world. And we just couldn't believe that NSA would let us come in. Today's
it was exclusive, but you got a ticket. Yeah.
Yeah. Today's 25, 30, 35 year old person, they don't come in with that same motivation. Unfortunately, they come in with what I call a pack mindset. They're, of course, technology has changed the game today, but they come in a 30, a younger person, now younger is anybody under 55, but anybody under 35 especially, they have their own little cell of 5, 6, 7 best friends, their inner circle.
Yeah.
They're texting each other every day, they're connected. They don't necessarily are not driven to be a part of a larger community as long as they have their little group. And so it becomes even more important today that person who steps in finds their sliver of their home within your association as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the invisible wall goes up and it's like, they're out of here. And unless association executives begin to address that more seriously, a younger person is going to come in and make a few quick snap judgments and say, there's a bunch of good people, but they're older. This is not where I'm going to invest my money and time and energy. But the sooner that person gets plugged in and finds that sliver of that community that is more like him or more like her, the more likely it is they will stay.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that same community group, I feel like, is getting a lot of influence from the same phone where you mentioned they're texting it. There's plenty of apps out there that they're following for hours a day. And I still think there's a strong opportunity for associations to embrace that further and bring in influencers into their communities that would really draw that. Imagine if you can create an opportunity for somebody who they've followed for years on their phone to bring them into an in-person setting, but it's sort of a members only club, right? You want to get to the Zig Ziglar, you got to be an NSA member, right? You want to get to XYZ influencer who's going to be our main speaker. Well, that's a members only type of thing. And that's not trying to be exclusive or standoffish or discriminatory. That's a privilege or a value of the industry and the membership. And so rather than trying to maybe recruit these larger members because they'll pay more dues, maybe there's more of a partnership with the top end of your membership that you could make in order to incentivize this younger group who could really learn from what they've done in the industry.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think something that would prove to be time well spent is the subject of reverse mentoring. As some of us are getting older in the association world, sometimes we get stuck into thinking that we're the smarter ones. And Ken Blanchard taught me a very important lesson. He did a favor for me about 8 years ago. He spoke at a meeting that I put on in San Diego, and he came over and he did the opening keynote speech. And a lot of people don't realize this, but Ken Blanchard has never published his own book. He's co-authored over 60 books. Even the 1 Minute Manager was co-authored with Spencer Johnson. Yep. And he was asked, and he gets asked this question, you're the great Ken Blanchard, why would you not have your own book? And he, in just the most humble way, he goes, I just learned so much more when I work with others.
Right.
And his project at that time was co-authoring a book with a 35-year-old on reverse mentoring. And so I think younger people today, associations and communities, again, large, medium, or small, might not be shining a light on the contributions that these younger, smart, talented people can make in their communities.
I love this. I feel like I'm sitting in on a amazing business coaching session, but but at the same time, I gotta wrap us up. But what I want to just chime in before I pull us to the very end here is what I'm hearing you say, Mark. It's almost like the beginning of your experience, was looking for like, how do you get access to the larger things? Social media has democratized community almost to some degree for a lot of people. And so now it is, how do you get specialization back in so that you can find the unique gifts and talents and make sure that they're going out within the association and the organization in a way that actually, lifts all boats, if you will. The rising tide lifts all boats. And so I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people, social media can be a real thing that a lot of people, especially our generation and above, like, don't love. But at the same time, there's an equalization and democratization that's happened there that has allowed us to rethink what values and skills people do bring in various areas, stages of life, stages of career, and so forth. So I love this way of thinking. And Lucas and I, when I lived in Virginia, belonged to the same church, and they were approaching the same thing. And churches, I think, are just one more form of an association that are realizing that not everyone, wants to come in and sit in the grand, sanctuary, and that's all they need. They do actually need to get into the individual communities and find where they can find and then reverse mentor or mentor both ways. So I love that, but I do need to wrap us up. So and again, we will be sure to put your name out there, because I'm sure a lot of people could benefit talking to you about this. But we would love to know if you have anyone that you think we would benefit from having on the show for our audience. So just curious.
Well, if she would do it, and I will put in a darn good word, but I would have you make the introduction to the GPS girl, Karen Jacobson. She is the Australian voice of Siri, and she's in, I believe it's now at 1 billion units around the world.
That's amazing.
If you have an iPhone. If you have an iPhone, change your voice to the Australian voice of Siri, and that could be one of your next guests.
I love it. I mean, I was saying we've had the voice of the Kansas City Royals. Now we get to have the voice of the Australian Siri. I won't try to embarrass her by, g'day, mate. She would just laugh me off the show. But that sounds exciting. Once more, we'd have a guest from a wholly different area that would be really exciting for our guests. So thank you so much, Mark, for giving us some of your time this week. We really appreciate it. Lucas, as always, great to see you.
You too, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mark.